All right, hello everybody, and welcome back to another episode of our Indie Heads podcast artist breakdown series. We'll probably think of a more coherent name for that at some point, but we're back with episode 2 today. We're talking about the Microphone's second full-length LP, It Was Hot, We Stayed in the Water, which came out in September of 2000. And yeah, I guess the way that we're going to start this is just by there's a pretty good introduction in the liner notes of this album
Yes.
that we're going to have Alex read, and then it's we'll just kind of jump off from there. There's some good talking points to use in it.
All right. Says Phil. Recorded between September 24th, 1999 and March 6, 2000 at Dub Narcotic in Olympia, almost constantly, as a way of life, living a block from the studio and lurking there every day and sharing every meal with friends, all of us drifting, doing our things in a wet, bone-chilling concrete small city. Of the Microphones albums, this is the one that comes closest to resembling quote-unquote collaboration. The participation of others is specified below. Sorry, that I did not mean to read. It then just goes into detail about the press and the cover art and stuff.
Right, but I do think that that is kind of a good point to jump off. Specifically, the part where he talks about this album being one of his more collaborative albums.
Yeah.
Because I think kind of as Phil Elverum transitioned into like the Mount Erie stuff, his albums did seem to become a little more insular, and they seem to be more just Phil kind of experimenting by himself, especially with some of his like early Mount Erie stuff where it literally is just Phil. This album, as well as the kind of other early Microphone stuff, you can definitely hear the influence of many other people.
Yeah.
Just a quick rundown of some of the like names of people who are on this, like obviously Phil, then there's Mira again, who shows up on many of the Microphones albums, Kayla Marisic again,
Who also did the cover art.
Yep, did the cover art, and then she also sings on this album a couple times. You have Carl Blau, who's another local anacortes musician who's on this, Kelvin Johnson again. And I can definitely hear that element in this album. I don't know about you, but it definitely does feel more collaborative, I would
More
say.
communal. Yeah. No,
Yeah.
I do get that. There's on every song where there are vocals, there is a secondary
hmm
vocalist.
Yeah, exactly. There's a cover of an Eric's Trip song on here,
Yes, which
which
I actually didn't know it was a cover, and for the longest time I thought it was one of my favorite Phil songs, but it's not a Phil song.
no, and funnily enough, though, it is a Eric's Trip song, and of course, Eric's Trip is the band fronted by Julie Dworin, who he would go on to collaborate with a lot
Yeah.
in the future. So even though she's not physically on this album, she's kind of on this album in spirit, I guess, um, which is more tangible, especially because she does end up collaborating with him a bunch in the future. So
You can see how like the tenderness of these lyrics really kind of influenced
yeah,
his like writing style and like the kind of specific details that he tends to drift towards, I guess.
yeah, and I mean the song we're referring to is "Sand" is the name of the song, and I can completely understand thinking it was just a normal Mount Erie slash Microphone song. It definitely has the same aesthetic, I guess, if
Yeah. He
you want to
does.
call it that.
I listened to the original version earlier today and I like he does really kind of radically change how the song goes. Like he brings I don't know, he brings these organs in that
hmm
really define the mood for me, which are not present in the original song. The original song is just like acoustic guitar and the two vocalists and you know.
Yeah. And we talked about this a lot on the last album, where I feel like the primary goal of the songwriting sort of is to evoke a certain atmosphere, and it's very heavy on making cool, quote unquote soundscapes and
Yeah.
atmosphere and ambience, and that definitely gets put into that song as well, because the original is just kind of a sparse acoustic song, whereas this song has tons of atmosphere, like you said, with the organs.
Yeah.
he does this cool thing kind of throughout the album, and I don't know how often he would go on to do it, but the way it's kind of mixed is instruments will be in one ear and then the vocals will be in the other ear,
Yeah.
or he makes it so the instruments kind of have a sense of where they are spatially, almost like in the room, like something's to the right of you or something's to the left of you
Yes.
or in front or
He
behind.
he plays with the panning a lot, and
Yeah.
like the panning on the acoustic guitar that opens the album on the pull is remains one of my favorite things that he's done. It's like at turns pretty and percussive, and you know.
Yeah, beautiful segue into the pull, because I just want to talk about the pull because I feel like I could do a whole podcast episode about this
So
song.
absorbing
Yeah.
and just like pretty, but also, it's got like a harsh instrumental section.
Mhm. Yeah, I think this is easily in consideration for an all-time great Phil Elverum song.
Oh
There's so
yeah.
many cool things about it. Again, the layered guitars that they pan back and forth from ear to ear, so it almost sounds like the guitar is like swirling around your head. Um, and then again, it has like the greatest drop in all of music. I don't know if you can call it a drop, but where it's just an acoustic guitar and then just it gets blown up to 10 like
Yeah.
halfway through the song. Um, the really cool, like slightly, I guess, off kiltered vocal harmonies. It just gives it, um, I don't know, it just gives it a really unique kind of texture.
There are these weird bells at the end of the song.
Yeah.
Like I are they bells? I can't tell. There's like it's like you took bells and then just like they like glitched out on a computer, or I don't know.
It, it, it sounds like he plugged bells into like an electric guitar amp and then like
Yes.
shook them.
Yeah. Yeah, or like maybe he just like had them in like a MIDI keyboard or something. He was just
Right.
dragging his fingers across.
Yeah, that is what it sounds like. But I think Phil to this day only records on tape. Um, so I don't
Really?
even know if he has access to like a MIDI keyboard. He just finds weird ass ways in real life to make crazy sounds.
Yeah. And it actually does say in the liner notes that they were using a 16 track. So,
Oh yeah.
yeah.
hmm
All right,
Um,
back to the poll though, and in general, it really feels like to me like a good indication of what was to come. Like it feels like a clear reflection of the Glow Part 2 and even some stuff he'd be doing later on in his career, and I don't know, the narrative of him dying and I guess escaping as a misty spirit into the
yeah.
air is quintessential Phil.
I think
Um,
I think this is the first song. Correct me if I'm wrong. I'm pretty sure this is the first song where he actually mentions the glow by name. I
yes.
don't think it comes up anywhere in Don't Wake Me Up, but
Yeah, this album is kind of where he really starts to write in like his kind of self-referential, metaphorical way, and which
yeah,
would come to dominate and define the Glow Part 2.
right. Like again, you mentioned the perspective of this song lyrically is sort of he's kind of personifying himself as like moisture in the air that's
Yeah,
getting breathed in by someone as like a metaphor for getting pulled towards someone. Just really cool how he kind of
it's it's
yeah, like
really it's really beautiful, honestly. Like
hmm
the kind of he paints this image of he turns to mist and then he's like amongst fog, which is kind of I don't know, just very evocative of like a certain type of malaise and then just the image of him being pulled in by someone's like warmth, glow, vitality
hmm
is really lovely.
yeah. One other thing I want to mention about this song is the goddamn drums and how Phil is somehow so extremely good at drumming, even though that's never really at the forefront of
Yeah.
his songwriting. It's just his drumming is so like visceral.
I would
Um,
I would actually counterpoint that. Like there are moments on the Glow Part 2 where the drums are like just as like an expressive and an important component of the song as his voice.
that's fair. That's fair. I guess
Yeah.
more what I mean is he doesn't get enough credit for that. People
Yes.
don't. Yeah,
Yeah,
people aren't like, oh, Phil Elverum, he's that guy that's good at drumming, but they should
yeah.
be like that.
He's honestly one of my favorite drummers. Like
Yeah,
I most of the time I'm not I don't think about drumming a lot. Like obviously there are some really good exceptions, but I don't know. Phil, like, drumming is something I always notice in his songs and really sticks out to me and that I like think about.
it just kind of goes back to him having a really, really particular understanding of how he wants every aspect of the album to sound sonically. Everything gets a lot of detail.
Yeah, and also he just you know, a lot of people just use drums for timekeeping, but Phil turns it into an emotional instrument.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Which, speaking of that, there is a song on here that is just called Drums, that is in
Yep.
fact just drums.
It is just drums. Yeah.
in
We talked
the
about.
in the liner notes. Sorry, well you can go first.
Oh, yeah, you probably have a more important thing to say. I was just going to say, throwing back to the last episode, I just love how
Right.
it's kind of that early tapes type of thing where it's
Yeah.
a song called Drums, it's drums, and there's a song called Organs, and it's organs, and it's
Yeah.
this sort of, it still kind of has the like ethos of a production experiment.
So apparently Drums was the result of him and Carl Blau staying up all night on two opposing drum sets and just like beating on them and just layering track after track of that.
Yeah,
And
it's
eventually he said that eventually he went home after like 44 takes or something, but Carl Blau just stayed there and kept doing it.
that is how it is. You can tell it's more than one drum set. As a matter of fact,
Yeah.
there's another song on here. I'm trying to find if I wrote it down somewhere where it's like it sounds like there's five drum sets drumming at the same time.
Yeah.
Uh, all right, let's just talk about the glow. I feel like it's time.
Sure.
We'll just get right into it.
Yeah. The
So
elephant in the room.
the
Eh,
oh hey, there
eh,
you go.
eh.
Yeah, excellent.
I
Yeah, so
didn't
this
when I was going to say that I didn't mean it as a reference to the cover art, and then it was just
it
so
just
bad.
was. We're keeping it in.
Yeah.
We're keeping it in. But yeah, the glow. So this is the song that it got an entire album as a sequel. It's an
Yep.
11-minute long epic song. So much happens in it. So many references kind of show up on the Glow Part 2 that originate in the song. The album truly does feel like a sequel to this song. Like if the Glow the song was on the Glow Part 2, it granted would be like a 70-minute album, but it also would fit sort of stylistically in there.
Yeah.
He references September, so there's one of them. Um, so I
I
guess
do think it would be weird though because the Glow Part 2 almost is more of a response than a sequel.
yeah,
You know,
that's a good way
I
to put
was
it.
really thinking about that. Like, it feels like he takes the concepts and just like rages against them.
Yeah,
um,
that's true because this song is it's kind of happy. It's
yes,
the like, and I guess this is kind of a good segue or a good time to ask like what do you think the glow is? It's such a vague question, and I don't know if there even really is an answer.
right.
But or at least what is it like characterized as in this particular track?
Well, I think I don't know. We watched that little that Phil show and he said that it's kind of like life and that I don't know that feels right to me. Like this just kind of not necessarily literally like life, but kind of vitality, like warmth and being alive. You know, like the feeling you get when you listen to the house that heaven built.
Yeah, that's good. I'll just read that quote that you referenced because it's kind of hilarious. Basically, the context is he's just doing some show, and for some reason he has a halftime Q&A session just in the middle of this concert he's doing. Um, and so someone asks him like, "What does the glow mean?" And his quote is as follows. He says, "I got a book called The Glow by Brooke Streisand, and it's sort of a thriller, like a jogging culture thriller murder mystery for people who are really into jogging." He says, my version of the glow is similar to Brooks, which is sort of like, being alive. This is such a vague, like, non-answer, but it also makes complete sense.
Oh yeah. I don't think you could give like a clear answer, or at least it would be like, I don't know, kind of self-defeating in a
Yeah.
way.
This is kind of a good time to bring up. So the last line of the song, "The Glow," is on the cold, dark ocean floor. I felt warmth from behind a door. I asked to come inside, and the glow replied. And then instead of saying something, there's just this really loud organ sound. Um, but in the liner notes of "It was hot, we stayed in the water," this line in the lyrics is just like a little picture of a sun, like a sunshine with a little smiley face on it, and that's sort of representing the like whatever that sound is, the glow.
Yeah.
Uh, just like it's replying by emitting light or glowing or something. It's just like a cool, it's like such a visual image, but it comes across as sound somehow.
That's interesting. In my version of the liner notes, and I have the 2013 reissue, it's not, there isn't like a smiley face in it. It's just like kind of little lines that sort of like,
Oh,
display a glowy kind of feeling.
yeah.
But it's
So
interesting that he changed that
yeah,
after however many years. 13 years, I guess that's not a hard thing. This came out in the year 2000.
right, yeah. Um, I just think that's just such a cool idea how he kind of is able to represent these visual things in a sonic way because so much of his
Right.
subject matter in this album and in the Glow Part 2 are rooted in very tangible, visible things like the glow and like the breeze and the blow
Yeah.
and the gleam. There's all these things that you can see, and he's kind of cramming them into music.
Yeah. Yeah,
Um,
it's I don't know. It's all very elemental, which kind of defines Phil as a songwriter and an artist.
yeah, and this album was supposed to be this one was
Water?
water. Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
There's a lot of references to water on this album too. That makes sense.
And ice and,
Yep,
different
like
states of water
yeah,
specifically he goes
exactly.
into a lot.
Yeah, there's fog and ice and water and steam and all that.
Yeah.
hmm Um, so one interesting thing that I wanted to bring up at some point during this episode was the difference between the gleam and the glow,
Yes.
because really they're in the English language they're kind of like synonyms, but the way they're characterized in Phil's music is almost like they're polar opposites of each other.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of interesting. It like they are sort of synonyms. They are sort of synonyms, but they aren't like the glow is kind of feels inherently like this kind of slow warm thing, and then the gleam is like it's kind of a harsh flash of light that's very
Yeah.
like here and gone.
hmm Yeah, because all over the glow, he talks about how it's like this nice warm thing and it kind of envelops you.
Yeah.
Versus the gleam in both this song and the Gleam Part 2, which we'll get to eventually, he mentions how like you'll go blind if you see the gleam, or like you can't look at it and it hurts to look at it. And yeah, it's just the way it's characterized, it seems a lot darker, I guess, in a
Yeah.
way. Like even the song itself, The Gleam, compared to the rest of the album, which is relatively, um, I wouldn't say it's poppy, but it's got a lot of pop sensibility and a lot of kind of nice melodies. It's definitely not as abrasive or
Yeah.
as distorted as Don't Wake Me Up. But then you get to The Gleam, and it very much is like distorted and dark.
It's such
Um,
a harsh foil to the glow.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's heavy.
Right. So, and again, who really knows what the exact meanings of these things are? I feel like they're more supposed to be uh, like evocative of a certain like different feelings than actual things that you can define.
Right. Yeah.
Um, but I wrote this in my notes, and we can completely delete this if it's as stupid as I think it is. But the glow is to Luigi as the gleam is to Waluigi. That's canon.
Oh my
Yep.
god.
So, um, yeah,
Wow.
I don't know how I kind of came up with that, but it makes sense in my head. So yeah.
I'm not sure if I understand, but it's still a really incredible image.
Yeah, that's what it maybe Phil's on the same page. I mean, Luigi and Waluigi were invented at this point in time, so
This
I
is
think,
true.
yeah. But then again, like the Glow Part 2 is obviously a very kind of painfully sad record, which
Yeah.
does still center around the glow. So I don't know. It's not necessarily like a yin yang kind of thing, but it is an interesting kind of distinction that he makes a lot.
Yeah.
Um, and then there's other the noun songs like you got the breeze.
In the liner notes for the breeze, it's just an instrumental, and I'm guessing he didn't collaborate with anyone on this, and underneath it he just wrote no available information.
Yeah, I like the breeze. It's like, yeah, just kind of a little creepy instrumental track with some nice organs. It's got these very slow and like brooding drums that feel like a funeral march or something.
Yeah.
Um, but another interesting thing actually that I read last night is the song Something, which Phil has probably dozens of songs called Something at this point. It's
Yeah.
kind of just his version of making a song called Instrumental, even though he also has songs that are just called Instrumental. So who
Yeah.
actually knows? But this is the only Something song in his lyric or in his discography that has lyrics in it. And apparently it's also the only one with an alternate title, which is The Blow.
Huh.
Which it's I don't think it's explicitly stated by Phil himself anywhere, but there is a song called "The Blow Part 2" on one of his live albums, and it shares kind of the same melody and verse structure of this song, so you can kind of like
Oh,
assume that this
interesting.
is "The Blow Part 1." Um,
I wonder why he went with calling it something instead.
yeah, I'm not sure. It might have been like might have been kind of retroactively called
Yeah.
"The Blow" because he says "The Blow" somewhere in the lyrics. Um, so maybe he just made a sequel to it, and then it
Maybe.
just kind of makes sense backwards like that.
Yeah. Because
Um,
in all the other somethings, like most of them are barely even like instrumentals. They're kind of like ambient noise,
yeah. That's a good way to put it. I think that's
or
also a
like
good.
almost like a weird midsection of an instrumental.
Yeah. I'll try to avoid talking too much about the Glow Part 2 right now, but this
It's kind of hard because this is like in so many ways this feeds into the Glow Part 2.
it
Like so
does
many of the concepts introduced here were, discussed again on the Glow Part 2, and
definitely.
even though a lot of these songs kind of touch on like happy feelings a little bit, like you can definitely see the relational tumult that we can
Yeah,
assume led to the full like breakdown on the next album.
no,
You know?
definitely. They're very inherently tied together in many
Yeah.
ways. But that point you brought up earlier is interesting because you're right. Like the some things on the Glow Part 2 are very much ambient kind of sound, whereas the instrumental songs are actually kind of songs with
Yeah.
instrumentals. Yeah. So yeah, now we have the glow and the gleam and the breeze and the blow to deal with. So
Sets the stage for a lot of his discography.
it really does. It really does. This is like the birthplace of many of these kind of common themes that just
Yeah.
continue to show up in his discography.
Yeah.
Uh, to this day, I mean, he still references uh, these songs like in some of his newer albums. So
Yeah, I don't know. I remember realizing the other day that I think it's no, no. I
no,
don't know. One of the tracks on Now Only interpolates one of the tracks on Dawn, or
yep.
from that era. I can't remember which ones.
I think it's two paintings.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking, but it felt wrong for some reason. Or I was
That's,
thinking it was like Earth.
yeah. And there's other ones. I want to say there's a reference on Lost Wisdom too to one of the microphones. albums, but don't
There
quote
is.
me on that.
On Belief, they reference "Let's Get Out of the Romance," which
Mm.
he
Hmm.
kind of tried to make a song multiple times, but I don't.
Yeah,
It seems like he didn't really ever kind of do it to like how it felt like it should be, or I don't
yeah, right. Um, so yeah, that kind of stuff. There was a little bit on "Don't Wake Me Up" where things started to kind of present themselves that would go on to characterize his music in the future. But this
know. Oh
album
yeah.
for sure feels like the first like bona fide microphones album. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and I think this was the first album by the microphones that I got into after the Glow Part 2, which if you're out there and are trying to get into the microphones, this is, I would say, a very excellent starting point if you don't feel like just diving straight into the Glow Part 2. It's probably one of his more accessible records, at least,
Yeah.
I would say, to some extent. Again, there is um, a lot of melody and a lot of, you know, I don't know, like pop sensibility. I feel like that's not a good way to describe it, but it's just definitely kind of sheds some of that abrasion and noise and distortion in favor of a more kind of cleaner sound.
Yeah. I don't know.
Uh,
He was starting to like get really get into the weeds on like the sound collage stuff,
yep.
which has its ups and downs. Like I do really love this record, but not everything pans out for me, I guess, or fits together in the way I want it to. For example, and this totally doesn't totally fit with the sound collage thing, but between your ear and the other ear, I kind of like I like it, but the repetitive strumming does not do a whole
Yeah.
lot for me.
Yeah. This song is, well, I would say this album is, I don't know if this is like sacrilegious to say. It's definitely a little front loaded, I would say. After the
Oh yeah,
first half, it definitely
absolutely.
loses maybe a little bit of focus.
Yeah.
Um, but that's also
It
more
starts
speaking.
it starts so strong though. Like
That's
The
the
Pull
thing.
is
Yeah,
one of his absolute best songs.
for
And
sure.
then,
Yeah,
that side A ends with The Glow, which is so like I don't know, it's such a centerpiece.
absolutely. If you just took side A of this and made it its own EP, it would be the greatest EP of all time. So it's hard to like kind of keep that level of consistency. I guess it's not that hard for Phil since he did it a year later, uh, but
Uh,
yeah, there's the first half is definitely where I think the kind of meat of the album is.
yeah. And when I put on the album, it's because I was thinking about like The Pull or Sand.
Yeah,
I wanted to listen to one of those songs,
yeah.
and that's what draws me in usually.
Also, I got to give a shout out to Ice. We mentioned it briefly, but
Yes.
Ice is an excellent song. It's kind of more of just like actually two songs that are smushed together. Like the first part is this kind of like loud and cacophonous, overblown drums and bass type of thing, which he does a lot, and then it just kind of drops off into this really beautiful, delicate, some more panning acoustic guitars and like
Yeah.
xylophone and all this. It just has a really unique atmosphere, really
It
interesting
it
texture.
really works though.
Hmm.
Like I don't know, it's just right, and it this song especially feels like it could fit very snugly on the Glow Part 2.
It does because it's kind of short.
Yeah.
A lot of the songs on the Glow Part 2 don't necessarily, that's what I'm looking for. Like they don't necessarily fall into a coherent structure, like verse, chorus, verse. It's kind of
Yeah.
verse, 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 or one verse and then another totally different verse,
Yeah.
uh, which does give it a sort of, it's kind of a uniquely Phil Elverum thing to do. I feel like a lot of his songs are like that, for sure. Or like Carl Blau is another one. It's the song's like a minute and 20 seconds long or something like that.
That Carl Blau is actually titled that because apparently it was structured around this early Carl Blau demo that he
Oh,
doesn't remember the name to. And
that's funny.
everything after or starting with the line "Long live his words, all caught up on his own." It's basically just a cover of that song.
Oh, interesting. I didn't actually know that because I had to look it up yesterday because I knew that Carl Blau was a friend of Phil's. I didn't think he was like
Yeah.
he's not like it's more of a sort of little friendship song than it is like an ode to Carl Blau or something. But
Yeah. Well, it's a little fun fact here. Phil has this drum machine, or used to. I know he was trying to sell it on Twitter a little while back. It's very old, and he labeled it Carl Blau, and literally there are tracks where he was just using that drum machine, but still credited Carl as the drummer.
that's really funny.
Yeah.
Yeah. Also, does this song? It sounds like a doo-wop song to me.
Yeah, no, the melodies or the harmonies in the beginning, very doo-wop.
Yeah, and it's got that little like do 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 like eighth notes on the piano.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, what else? What songs have we not mentioned yet by name on this album?
Organs? No, we
Organs?
did. We did. I think we've talked about everything actually.
Cool, yeah. Again, I mean, organs is organs, It's organs, baby.
It's quite pretty. That song ends very abruptly, which I actually feel like is a perfect way to just close
Yeah.
this album.
hmm Yeah, I think at after this album, I feel like his future projects are so coherent and so holistic. They're tied together and they start strong and end strong in a really consistent way. This is sort of the last, I guess, taste of Phil just throwing sounds at the wall to some extent. Obviously, there's
Yeah.
fully formed, fully thought out songs on here, but there are also moments like this song where it's just sort of an organ loop that just kind of ends, and then that's the end of the album.
Yeah. The
Yeah,
glow part too, like he does throw sounds at a wall, but it always makes like some sort of thematic or emotional
yeah,
sense.
exactly, exactly.
It's always like really, I don't know, climactic or just significant to the like tone of the song or we'll talk about that next episode.
Yeah. Oh man. Yeah. Absolutely.
Do you have anything else to say about this
Um,
record?
I'm trying to think. I don't know. Yeah, just I mean, I mentioned this last time too. The background noises he puts in, I think, are so cool. There's so many.
Yeah.
Like the space feels really kind of lived in, and you can almost get a sense of where it was recorded. There's sounds of like doors opening and closing, and like running water and stuff. Um,
Even
and
like in spite of that though, like some of the textures on here have this just crazy otherworldliness to them that I think is kind of unique to this album. And
yeah,
like maybe Mount Erie also, but that album is just really fucking weird.
yeah. Yeah, it's he kind of makes it sound both otherworldly and also very very human, which I think is
Yeah.
a very prominent characteristic of his music in general.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that probably about does it.
Yeah.
Cool. Well,
Cool.
that was it was hot. We stayed in the water. And again, the way this series will be structured is we will have episodes where we're talking about several different projects, which will give us a lot more content to draw from rather than just 11 songs. Um,
I don't think there's a huge issue with having short little episodes though. I feel like that's kind of nice
yeah,
and digestible compared to our like 2 hour long rambling flagship podcast.
exactly, exactly. And next week is the Glow Part Two. I don't even know how I can I don't even know if I can form a coherent thought about that album. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah.
It's gonna be probably just us like rambling for like an hour, but that's fine. It'll be good ramblings.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
All right. Cool. Well, thanks again for tuning in, everybody.
Yes. Thank
Um,
you. Our
thank
listeners are the backbone of society. Without them,
absolutely.
America would fall.
We appreciate all 20 of you so much. And yeah, we'll be back next week with the unequivocal greatest album of all time.
uh,
All right. Bye, everybody.
Goodbye.